All right, I have a very special episode coming to you today. This is the 300th episode of the Jazz Piano School podcast. My name is Brendan Lowe, creator and founder of Jazz Piano School. I've been doing this for about 9 years now, and I just reached episode 300. So what I did to celebrate was that I hosted a live Zoom Q&A with some Jazz Piano School members, with non-members. All of us hopped on Zoom, and I allowed the participants to ask myself questions, ask my Jazz Piano School staff questions, Sterling Koza and Trent Bryden, and we answered any and all questions for about 2 hours. Can you believe it? So I filmed this podcast completely live, unscripted, and you're gonna get to see that Zoom call that we hosted and did live, and we answered all the questions. And the students had amazing questions that I know you're going to learn so much from. I had my software running, my staff had our software running as well. So you can slow down, you can, go back and watch what we're doing and describing and showing. Anyway, it's an amazing event. I'm so happy, and I just want to thank you for all your support, to my fans, to my followers, for supporting me, right? Helping me get to 300 episodes, because again, without you, I wouldn't be here. So I truly appreciate your support. But again, with that being said, I hope you enjoy this live Zoom celebration event. It was so much fun. I have no plans to stop the Jazz Piano School podcast and everything you see on this YouTube channel. So go ahead, check this out. And obviously check out all the future content that we're going to be releasing here on the Jazz Piano School YouTube channel. And don't forget to go to jazzpianoschool.com to check out all the free education that we have there. And if you're looking to take some next steps, we do have our membership and courses available. Okay? Again, my name is Brendan Lowe, creator and founder of Jazz Piano School. And here is the 300th Jazz Piano School podcast episode, coming to you, filmed previously, live on our Zoom event. Here we go. Welcome to the Jazz Piano School podcast, episode number 300. Woo! There's a bunch of people here. None of you listening right now can hear them because they're all on mute. I have them on mute, but everyone's cheering and clapping. I see them going crazy right now. It's amazing. So we are here at the 300th podcast. My name is Brendan Lowe, creator and founder of Jazz Piano School. And wow, I can honestly not believe this is 300. This is just, years. And I think I talked about it in the last podcast, but I kind of fell off the wagon for a while. It's very hard to do something consistently. I'm sure all of you know, for a long time. And just the fact that you all are pursuing jazz piano, that's a, accomplishment in itself. Just the pursuit of trying to learn jazz piano over and over again. It's like getting poked and being like, man, and then coming back to get poked again, right? Because it can be very discouraging. But just that is an accomplishment in itself. So I commend all of you for being here, for listening, and just showing up, and continuing the amazing jazz pursuit that this craft is. So again, thank you all so much for being here. So anyone listening right now, we have a room full of participants that are going to participate in the live Q&A right now that we're doing for the 300th celebration. I have two of the Jazz Piano School staff members with me here as well, Trent Bryden, Sterling Koza, amazing professional jazz pianists and educators. They will be helping me answer questions and demonstrate some teaching as well. And you're going to hear a bunch of questions. And what I'm going to do in just a second is open it up to all the participants in the room and have them ask questions to us. And the questions are going to be anything. Obviously, I'm recording this live. I don't really know what we're going to be asked, but I'm going to kind of give them some help and encouragement. And you guys can ask anything you want, anything you want. It doesn't even have to be about jazz piano. I got a couple questions yesterday from some students saying that they were curious about how do you go about getting involved in jam sessions? I know Dunya, one of the members here, is involved in a lot of group playing. There's other members involved in group playing. How do you get over the fear of playing at jam sessions? That's a great question too. How do you go about a practice routine, or how do you stay consistent and do something for 9 years like I have, right? So this is how I got to 300 podcasts. So any of those questions are completely okay to ask. And I highly encourage those types of questions as well, because again, a lot of the
pursuit of this craft is about your mental mind space. And a lot of times, if you're not feeling good, if you're feeling kind of down and discouraged, you don't want to practice. I don't want to practice. I don't want to do anything, right? I want to sit on my couch and probably veg out and watch Netflix. So it's very difficult when you're not able to learn something in the manner that you expect, or do anything in life in the manner that you expect. It's very hard to go to the shed, to go to the chopping block and work it out. And mentally speaking, we need to have resilience, fortitude, and just the strength to keep going at this amazing craft that is music. And the more we can conquer our mindset, the more we can help ourselves and treat ourselves well, stay in optimal shape and space, the better we'll be at this and everything in life, obviously. Clearly you can hear I'm a motivational and positive person about treating yourself well in life. If that means going to get a massage or just chilling out by the pool, that's going to make you happy. You'll probably feel better and want to practice if you do that. But anyway, let's get started. Again, this is the 300th podcast. Real quick, before we get started, Memorial Day, our huge Memorial Day sale is coming up. If you're a monthly member, you can upgrade. If you're not a member, there's lots of deals, lots of discounts at our Memorial Day sale. We do a couple big sales per year. Memorial Day, obviously July 4th, Christmas, stuff like that. So if you are interested in becoming a member of Jazz Piano School or upgrading your account to lifetime status, basic or lifetime elite, which many of the members are here, definitely check out the links in the email that will be coming up very soon. Okay. Quick enough plug, guys. That was quick, right? Pretty quick. All right. So let's go to the room now and take some questions. So Randy had his hand up first. I'm going to change the settings here and allow you guys to unmute yourself. And then all I ask is that please just stay muted and remember to remute yourself after you've spoken. Otherwise, there will be kind of chatter and stuff as you ask your question afterwards. So you guys can now unmute yourself. So Randy, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, we can get started.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thanks for being here.
Oh, God. Yeah, I've been following your teaching for quite a while. I'm in Tennessee. You do a great job.
Thank you.
Actually, I have two short questions. I have a hard time, soloing over descending dominance. For example, There's No Greater Love and Bye Bye Blackbird, when the dominants are good. Now, and my question is, should I solo over every one of them individually, or can I use the tonal center or the pentatonic, because they go by a little fast? It's not like Freddie the Freeloader, they go by slowly. But in No Greater Love and Blackboard, they go. So that's my first question.
Yeah, I've got a response to that, Brendan, if you don't mind me chiming in.
Absolutely, go for it. Hold on, let me just make you the spotlight here. Yeah, go for it, Sterling.
Awesome. What's up, everybody? Thanks, Randy, for that question. I love it because it's very specific, yet it has applications for a lot of different repertoire and standards that we play all the time. Because if we think about descending dominance, right, that goes all the way back to the classical tradition, Bach and Beethoven. Bach would use descending dominance or secondary dominance a lot of the time, and those cycles of descending fifths are very common in European classical music, and that extends into jazz.
Can't hear Sterling. He's freezing.
Hey, Sterling, real quick, can you pull up your audio? Is it possible to put your audio up, your mic up just a smidge? I can hear you pretty well, but
yeah, I can do
if
that.
possible.
I can pull it up a little bit. How's this? Is this better?
Better? Yeah, much better. Yep.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
So we're talking about tonal harmony, especially in the European classical and Western traditions, which extends into what we do with jazz piano. The 5-to-1 cadence is something that theoretically is omnipresent, but it occurs in music, as common as Taylor Swift or Stevie Wonder or something like that. So I love that you're asking about this, Randy. And I would actually point you towards a podcast that I made recently. We were talking about mastering playing in all 12 keys, going around the circle of fourths. So I think many of you in the Zoom call today are probably familiar with that or have worked with that before. But in that podcast specifically, we were talking about, if you haven't seen it already, we were talking about practicing improvising over that descending fifths motion. And that could be 5-1, or it could be tritone substitution. So kind of like in Bye Bye Blackbird, right? You have these descending dominant chords, but that really is one and the same when you have the either descending fifths or tritone substitutions moving down in half step. And that's a little more advanced topic that, we might even do another podcast on. But in the podcast, I believe, what was it, Brendan, maybe number 298 or something, just a couple before this. We were getting towards 300. We were talking about just mastering playing over dominant chords. And in that video, we were practicing some dominant language, right, over that circle of fourths. So I like to start on C and just kind of go around all 12 keys just to really master each one of those tonal centers. So that circle of fourths can be a really powerful way to just practice those descending dominant chords. And first I'll do it out of time, kind of like I did, but then I'll put a metronome on and be really, grooving with it to get them really fluid, really solid. And then you're playing in really any key that you want to. You can have that going in all 12 keys. So that would be my recommendation for you, Randy. And if you want a more detailed explanation of that, this was kind of the Cliff Notes version. I would highly recommend checking out that podcast. I'll see if I can pull a link up for it for everybody and post it in the chat, because that was one of my longer podcasts. Actually, I went for about 30 minutes. I mean, Brendan's got the all-time record for length of podcasts. He's got if you go back in the archives, you got like some hour-long podcasts.
12, hour 15.
Yeah, he's really, really taking us on a journey. But I'll include the links if you're curious in as far as checking that out. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Cool, Randy. I'll touch base on that too, and then I just want to get an insight from Trent real quick too as well. So, like a lot of the times, working out your language first in one dominant chord is really important. So can I ask you a question? Do you have much dominant language just over like a C7 chord in general?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I practice them and all that. But when I start soloing, then I get caught into playing a scale or the pentatonic or something. So that's my thing.
Okay. So one of the big things that I teach too is about landing on chord tones, and it's a pretty foundational improvisational element. So let's say you were to start a C7 line, and you had, that's a very simple line, right? That's just 5, 6, 7, 1. Right? What you'd want to do is just try to move that around, right? And see if that can start to come out as your dominants are shifting downward. And depending upon what chord tone you land on, there's going to be different types of very common bebop movements. So if you're on the 1, like what I heard Sterling play a lot was a descending passing tone, right? So he was doing this a lot. I don't know if he did that, but he did the bebop scale a couple times. So landing on the 1, like if you land on the root of a dominant chord, one of the common movements is going to be that passing tone. You're going to hear that a lot. So if you have descending dominants and you land on like a B7, your kind of go-to language for landing on that root can be that chromaticism that moves down into that chord tone. And the same for the 3rd. Maybe if your common language on the 3rd is something like that. It wasn't the best example, but maybe you do this little pivot thing, right? And then you go to maybe a B flat. So as you connect the dominant chords between each other, you'll start to get used to where your hand is on the piano and then the chord tone that you're trying to kind of land on. And again, for example, if I start on the 1 here and then I go to the 3rd and then lead into the 3rd of my B flat 7, maybe I use my other language now. So depending upon where my hand is or what chord tone I'm landing on, it'll kind of dictate some of the language that I might be using or trying to experience. But again, connecting them through chord tones or landing on like some of those anchor points are really valuable. And just a quick hack that I like to do for dominant chords, because I personally get bored of just strings of dominant chords, but I'll reharm them with minor 2/5s before them. I love doing this, like the bridge to Eternal Triangle and stuff like that. So, or rhythm changes. Or any descending kind of dominant chords, right? So a lot of you have heard me do this before. If you have a C7, I'll make it a G minor 7. I'll make it a 2/5. Essentially, I just reharm it into a 2/5. And then instead of just a B7 chord, right? I would make it a F sharp minor. I'm just playing shells here, guys. Into the B7, and then same thing, F minor 7, B flat 7. So it's going to change your perception of the harmony in a lot of ways, and it's going to change your approach to the language, the way you look at it, right? So I might be thinking G minor now, and then landing, or if it's 2 beats per. So there's a lot of kind of reharm tricks too that I might recommend that you can kind of play around with. Trent, real quick, I want to kind of get to some other questions, but do you have any kind of like approaches that you use when you go into like a lot of dominant chords?
Yes. First of all, can you guys hear me okay? Yes.
The audio as well. Audio, please.
I think I'm seeing a thumbs up from Brendan. Are you guys? Can I get some thumbs up if you guys can hear me?
Yeah, if you can you turn your mic up just a little bit?
Yeah.
The volume?
How about this?
That's better.
Okay, I'll just stay close to it too. Okay, so a couple things. So regarding any problem in general, I think you have to try to be as specific as possible as to what your problem actually is, and then find a solution to practice that addresses that problem. So when you say, oh, I have problems soloing over dominant chords, it could mean a lot of things. It could mean you don't have a good conception of what a string of dominant chords really is, or like you said, Randy, it could mean you get stuck playing the same patterns over and over again. Those are kind of two different problems. They're similar, but they're separate. So I think it's important to pick what you want to fix and work on that. And then once you're satisfied with it, move on to the next thing. So that's my first thought. The second thought on dominant chords in general, Dunya and I have been talking about this on our lessons because she's working through I Can't Give You Anything But Love, which is the same start as, what did you mention? What was the tune? There Is No Greater Love. It's the same starting progression. It's 1, 4, 3, 6, 2, 5. And so I was trying to explain to her the 3, 6, 2, 5. If you boil everything down to a dominant chord, it's all just 5 to 1, 5 to 1, 5 to 1. If we're in the key of B flat and There Is No Greater Love, the D is the 5 of the G is the 5 of the C is the 5 of the F, and the F is the 5 of the B flat. And then we worked backwards even further, and we said, okay, well then what about the first two chords? What about the B flat and the E flat? And we realized if you bring the tritone substitution into it, and again we're treating everything as a dominant chord, the tritone of the B flat is an E, and then the tritone of the E flat is an A. So if you use tritone substitutions for the first two chords, it's actually all descending fifths all the way down, even from the first chord. You get E, A, D, G, C, F, B flat. So that's just kind of a mind-opening thing that really this pattern of 5-1 is happening all the time, even in places that you don't really realize it. And that pattern of going from 5-1 is something that's like probably, I would say, the core of music in general, at least like Western harmony and especially jazz music, the resolution of 5-1, and it's everywhere. So the more you can drill getting from a 5 to a 1, whether that be through a tritone substitution or through just the regular 5, that's something that you should be working on all the time because it happens everywhere. But then in terms of working on it specifically, I would just stay, I think Sterling said this, I think Brendan said this as well, stay on one chord at a time if you can until you feel comfortable with it. And then once you feel comfortable on that chord, practice landing on the start of the next chord. So if you're going from C to F, play on the C as long as it takes to feel comfortable and practice landing on the downbeat of the F on a note that sounds good. And do that wherever you have problems.
Awesome.
I could keep going on this.
Thanks, Trent.
That's my relatively short.
No,
okay, Brandon. Okay, Brandon. Thank you. Now, I have a short second question. Is it possible?
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, real quick. Let's do it.
Yeah, I like to use the chromatic scale, but I wanted to ask you, do you have to start on a particular note? For example, I'd like to play a 2-5-1, but using only the chromatic scale. Now, what note do I start on? Like if I'm playing D minor to G to C, because I use the chromatic scale, but it doesn't sound good all the time. And I wonder if there's a starting point that I should use when I'm starting the 2-5-1.
Sterling, do you want to help out with this?
Sure. Yeah, do you mind highlighting me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so chromaticism can be really helpful to just connect chord tones. If I think back to my favorite improvisers like Louis Armstrong, Lester Young, Oscar Peterson, they're masters of using chromaticism within a tonal context. We think of chromaticism as really experimental, like 20th century European classical or American classical traditions of like 8-tonal or 12-tone Rose Schoenberg, Alban Berg, but it doesn't have to be all crazy out, right? Louis Armstrong plays some beautiful chromatic notes over a tune like "Do You Know What It Means to Miss New Orleans," where it's just so sensitive, and it's all about how you use it. So when I think about those improvisers and I think about how they use that chromatic approach within a tonal context, I think it gets back to Brendan's point, thinking about chord tones. So if I'm improvising over a tune like, what did we say? We said, "There Is No Greater Love." What was the other one? What was the other one Trent mentioned? It was another
Randy
love
mentioned
tune.
Bye Bye Blackbird.
Bye Bye Blackbird.
Was the other one?
Yeah, so if you're using those chord tones, I'm thinking of the dominant chord, like F7, down to E, E flat, D, right? So I'll use some chromatic approach notes to highlight those chord tones, right? So instead of starting on the 5th, maybe I'll start a half step above, right? And then the same thing down a half step. And if you want to get more complex with it, you can add more chromaticism, more or less chromaticism, depending on what sound you're looking for. And those great improvisers like Oscar and Lester and Louis, they're aiming at these chord tones with chromatic notes. And so I think that can be helpful. If we think about the chromatic scale, we've got 12 notes, right? And which one do we start on? Well, I like to use the chords as sort of like a tonal center for my ear to latch onto, right? So you can use as much or as little chromaticism as you want, but those tonal centers of the chord tones 1, 3, 5, 7, and even higher, 9, 11, 13, if you want to extend up. I'd say use that as your home base so that it's not just like, oh, we're getting lost in, chromatic atonal land. I like to use those chord tones as home base.
Now, if you're soloing over a 2-5-1, how would you use the chromatics? If I'm soloing D minor, G to C, what note would I start on?
So I would start on a chromatic note related to each of those chord tones, right? So you could aim on the fifth, right? You could do some chromatic notes around the fifth, right? Maybe some approach notes from above or approach notes from below, right? And then for the 5 chord, you could do the same thing. Maybe now I want to focus on the fifth of the 5 chord. Right, I want to aim for the fifth, but I'm getting there, taking the scenic route a little bit, so to speak. Right? There's some chromatic notes, and then maybe I want to land on the third, so I'll do some chromatic approach notes from below. And I think Brendan's got a really nice podcast on this. Might be all the way back in the hundreds, talking about chromatic approach notes. So that's something, if you're curious about implementing that more into your improvisation, just like somebody like Oscar Peterson or Red Garland especially would use this a lot. It's actually just Red Garland's birthday, May 13th. And it happens to be my birthday too. I share a birthday with Red Garland, I just found out, which is pretty cool. And Stevie Wonder. But Red Garland, total master of chromatic approach notes. So I'd say, listen to your favorite improvisers and listen for how they use the chromaticism and let that be your guide. But I would say aim for those home bases of like chord tones, fifths, thirds, sevenths, and you really can't go wrong.
Yeah,
Okay,
Tom,
thanks.
I'll get to you in just one sec. Randy, just last real quick point. I think it's less about the chromaticism too. Like, I think that's important, but it's like how you get out of the chromaticism. So like, as a general rule of thumb, just to answer your question, I would probably start on a chord tone if you're looking to use chromaticism. And if you're doing a 2-5-1, I forget what key you said. Again, very general rule of thumb. Like Sterling said, this can be taken very out. Start on a chord tone. It's really about how you resolve into the next chord, more or less. So if you're using chromaticism, you can go up and down however you want, really. Start on a chord tone and then land on a chord tone on the next chord and use chromatics in between that. Obviously, if you're using chromatics all the time, it's just going to be a texture. It's not really going to be music if you're just going up in chromatics. And again, one last thing, Oscar Peterson was the king of doing this. He has some huge chromatic runs that he does in melodies, right? Like he would run up like 8 chromatics to get up to a melody or during a solo, like, stuff like that. Obviously I'm exaggerating, but chromatics is really a tool to get you into the next chord. I'd probably land on the chord tone. That's a
Thank
lot
you
for
very
you
much.
to work on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been very helpful. Thank you, Brendan.
Good. No problem. Yeah, Tom, let's go to you.
Congratulations on
Thank you.
300 episodes. I've been a big fan of yours for many years, and I think a member since 2018. I don't know if you remember, you did a Facebook thing where learn jazz piano in 10 steps or something like that. But anyhow, that got me hooked, and I've learned so much through your courses and my membership. So I am now working on reharms in stage 3 and enjoying very much putting reharms into different situations. And so here's a question of mine. It's really, well, I'll give you the specifics of it. I'm trying to work some reharms into all of me. And in the 3rd and 4th measures, it's E7. And then in the next 2 measures, it goes to A7. So there's the E7 has a melody in the 3rd measure, but then there's no melody in the 4th. Then it goes to the A7 and the 5th with a melody. So the reharm, when I'm kind of doing the fill for that 4th measure where there's a E7, there's no melody going on. Should I be focusing more on reharming to the chord I'm going to or the chord I'm leaving? In other words, I've tried both, but I kind of like doing the relative 2 minor, doing an E minor 7 going to A7, but that's really not a reharm of the E7 chord. I don't know if I make myself clear on that or not, but basically two measures of E7 going to 2 measures of A7, and where you've got no melody in the E7 thing, should I be focused on reharming the E7 or the chord that I'm going to, the A7, or I can do either one?
Yeah, for sure. I want to hear from Trent because I would like to get him in this if he doesn't mind. But real quick, yeah, the difference in reharmonization, it matters a lot if you're using the melody. Like if you're reharming a tune with the melody, that's going to make a huge difference, obviously, because you're kind of looking for clashes or things like that. Or if you're improvising, like when you're improvising, you have a lot more leeway to do things. But since it sounds like you're talking more or less under the melody, that's kind of going to be, you have to be a little bit careful on that. But Trent, do you want to answer this?
It's with the melody, but it's in a bar that there is no melody. So you can do a fill or
totally
do chords or whatever. So it's playing the melody though.
Okay.
Yeah, so I like the thought of reharming into the next chord, although you certainly could do it another way. But if we go back to our conversation on dominant chords resolving to the next chord, there's a lot of different ways that can happen. Like you meant, or I think you were talking about the relative 2. You could also use a tritone substitution, but there's also other ways. There's a lot of ways that you could get to a chord, and I think what you're talking about is the right way to think about it, of just finding a different way to get from that E7 to the A7. Or the A7 to the next chord. So I think that's a good way to think about it, and there's a lot of different ways you can go there. It depends on how much knowledge you have of harmony. That's one way you can get it from your head, of knowing what chords go to what chords. But also you can figure it out a little bit more by feel and by ear and kind of test some things out and experiment a little bit. And I think somewhere in the middle between those is usually the best way to reharmonize. Take a little bit of knowledge that you have, maybe get into arranging a little bit and actually working some things out. When you're on the fly and you're kind of in a group setting, you might have to rely a little bit more on what you know, and what you know is going to sound good. But when you're in your practice room by yourself, you can kind of test some things out. And obviously there's a lot of harmonic areas you can explore on different ways to get to the next chord that you can harmonize something. But I like the way you're thinking of moving from one place to another place, and just this is kind of what Sterling said earlier. You take the scenic route. You harmonically take kind of a curve around the outside and find a different way to get to the same place.
Yeah, and Tom, just as let me switch just for some like quick examples, maybe a few of us can give you. This is the first 4 measures of the tune, essentially going into the 5th measure. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. One sec, just trying to do this here. So going into this A7 here?
Yes.
Okay. Again, just common movements. You're always kind of thinking 5 to 1. You can do dominance, like down into that if you're trying to approach that A7. Even a half step dominant down into that, like to fill, is a very common movement, just like sliding down by B flat 7, which is, again, it's just the tritone of the 5 of the A. So you could either go, the E7 is already the 5 and it's leading to the, secondary dominant talk here, but it's leading to the A7, right? But you could just use a tritone there. You can throw in 2 5s if you want to kind of reharm that again. So you could go B minor 7. I like to do this a lot, is I'll use a 2 5 here and So I'll go B minor 7 into the E7, and then I'll do E minor 7 into the A7. So I'll go. So B minor 7 into the A7, and then, excuse me, into the E7. E minor 7 into the A7. So I'm using relative 2 minors as a really great reharm to kind of like hear some harmonic motion that's not just a dominant chord. Like as Randy was talking about dominant chords, you know, it's going to kind of sound the same if you want to. But Sterling or Trent, Sterling, do you have any kind of like reharm movements that you like to use over that particular spot?
Oh man, well, I mean, Trent was talking about taking the scenic route. I think anytime you talk about reharming, it's like we're going to a whole different destination. You know what I mean? Because if you think about a tune from beginning to end as point A to point B, reharming to me is the greatest freedom, especially as pianists, because we have so many options. For example, what if instead of going from point A to point B, we started from point C, or point F, or point Z? You know what I mean? So I take 2 approaches to reharming. One is using pre-existing chord structures and just changing the bass note. So that would look like, you know, if we had the very first measure, right? That's a very obvious C major chord, right? But we're starting from point F, maybe. So literally we could just put an F in the bass. Like, what if our first chord was instead of C, right? That's a completely different feeling, a completely different starting point. Same thing with the measure 2. This is very obviously an E major chord, right? Well, what if instead we put an F in the bass? Or, sorry, an A in the bass. We went from F to A. Right? That's a completely different stop on our journey. And if we get to that measure that Tom was talking about, this is a less obvious chord structure, right? This could be construed as like an A7, right? That's the original. But if I look at these 3 notes by themselves, there are a lot of other options that we could use. It could have a C, that works. It could have an A, but it could be A minor, or it could be we used F already. What if instead we put a B flat? Now I'm kind of just searching. You know, we're searching for different stops along the way, just seeing what lands, right? So now instead of C, E to A, we have F to A major 7, which goes up to B flat, right? And then maybe you want to go back to the beaten path and then go from A7 to D minor, right? So we went from, instead of point A to point B, we went from maybe point F to point G to point A to point B. You know what I mean?
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, so that's one approach I like to use, because that tune, All of Me, has such specific harmony, but who says we can't just turn that on its head and take a completely different route? So that's kind of one of my approaches.
Cool.
Can I expand on that, Brendan?
Yeah,
For a brief
absolutely.
moment?
Go for it.
So basically, what he's doing is you're finding kind of the least common denominator, or no, the greatest common multiple, one of those two, between 2 chords, and you find a shape that's a strong shape, and you find another bass for it, basically. And it's kind of a process of testing some different things around. And it's like Legos. You've got, you know, a structure that sounds good and is strong, and then you see what else it works with. You could also think of it as just chords that are related. They have a similar structure. They've got similar forms within them, but you find a different bass, and by bass I mean, you know, a different foundation to go under that whatever upper structure you could say is common between them. So that's really cool. I love doing that. And I think he explained it really well. Another thing for reharm is inner voice movement. You can find a voice that moves in that chord movement and then harmonize that movement a different way. So for example, right here, when you're going from the E to the A, Brendan was talking about going in dominant, so like go, F sharp, F, E, or something like that, basically descending in half steps to get to that E7. You could harmonize that if you want, and for example, put force under it like this. Right? I'm harmonizing that F, E, E flat, but then I'm just putting a structure under it that is a little bit different, but it gets to the chord we're going to. So that's another kind of alternate route you can take, is voicing the actual harmony, not the melody, but harmony that is kind of implied by the chord movement, and then harmonizing that in some other way.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Trent. That's awesome. And Tom, I would say, I mean, these are pretty advanced principles for everyone. Try them all out. And the ones in jazz piano school, obviously, that I teach you guys, the relative twos, the tritones, the sus, I would say those are pretty basic. So if you kind of learn to use those and then expand upon what Trent and Sterling are saying, I think you'll be pretty well set to kind of like use those tools in a reharm fashion, like through most tunes.
I think what Sterling was...
Whoops, sorry, Trent. My bad. I just muted you by accident. Trent, sorry about that.
You're good. I was just going to say Sterling's whole concept really is an extension of the relative two, which is that the shells exist in both chords, so you just pick a different root. That's what Sterling's doing. It's just common notes. It's just a more, it's an expanded version. So I think it builds on what you teach pretty well.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. Thanks for the question, Tom. That's great. Yes. Rich, good to see you, first of all. Second of all, what an amazing background. That's awesome. Thanks for making that.
Yeah, my little piece of congratulations to you, Brendan.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's an incredible accomplishment. 300. and not 300 little tidbits, right? Each one's like a masterclass. So yeah, I'm a fan. I'll try not to gush for an hour.
Yeah, it's all good. Thanks.
So you guys know I'm more foundational in my where I'm at right now in my approach or in my journey. So I'm going to take us out of theory and to something a little more rudimentary. Sterling, you mentioned the Mastering 12 Keys podcast a little while ago, and I listened to that. And besides all of the great content in there for a beginner like me, the thing that struck me the most was how beautifully you play just even scales, just major scales. Every single note is the same exact legato and the same volume. And I heard that and I recorded myself and I, compared, knowing what the comparison would be, but realized how much I wasn't working on when I was playing those scales. And I know all three of you guys have a classical background. I unfortunately have a ragtime background. So I'm wondering if you guys can give me some tips on where I can focus my attention to get a little better there, and maybe someday a podcast specifically about that.
Yeah, I love this question, Rich. It's something we don't often talk about, especially, making content like this. We're so concerned with the what as opposed to the how. So I love that was a big takeaway from you from that podcast. Touch is something that's so important to me as a pianist because, we're all pianists here. Maybe some of us are singers or multi-instrumentalists, but I always am envious of those musicians because they have an added option for expression, whether it's with vibrato or articulation or breath, right? Using more air to maybe give more feeling to a certain note. And as keyboard players, we really have to pull out some tricks to sort of emulate those sounds. We can't directly replicate them because we're not a wind instrument, right? The piano is a percussion instrument, so we're actually hitting the strings. We're striking the strings with hammers. And on top of that, most of us are playing keyboards. You know, I'm coming to you with a virtual keyboard. I'm playing my electric piano, which is going through the computer. And even that is a replication of the piano with the action of the hammer hitting the strings. That's all virtually modeled, you know. So if we think about it like that, we are playing a replica of an instrument that's trying to replicate the human voice, in a sense. That's how I tend to think about it. And with that in mind, the only way that we can achieve that level of expression is through our fingers, through our hands, right? Our touch. So I love that idea of maybe even doing a podcast on touch, because even when you're playing an electric or modeled instrument like I am today, the more sophisticated the instrument, the more you can replicate that touch. But how do we get that touch? Well, my father's actually a classically trained pianist, and that's where I learned this whole tradition, you know, of piano playing, and he's like my main conduit to the classical tradition, because he studied in Europe and has been playing classical piano for, you know, upwards of 30-40 years. And he's the one that told me straight out, all you need is scales and arpeggios. And that I'm sure that you're looking for me to say, like, oh, get this book or do this, you know, specific regimen, but it's really just scales and arpeggios. You know, there's some things that you can add, like there's the Hannon exercise, which I'm actually a big fan of. There's like the Czerny exercises. I don't know if some of you may be familiar with those. Those are like patterns of arpeggios and etudes and stuff. But how do we get the sound that we're looking for on the piano? You can really accomplish it through scales and arpeggios. And my advice to you in this, you know, short exchange, obviously we could go in depth more in a podcast situation, and I'd be really eager to do that, actually. But for today, I'll leave you with the thought of, how can you replicate the human voice on the piano? If I'm talking to you and sometimes my words stick out and some of them are louder than the other one, you know, that doesn't sound natural, you know. So I would just encourage you to think about, when you're practicing your scales and arpeggios, how can you make it so that each one is even and sounds like it's just flowing naturally from one to the next, just like you're having a conversation with somebody, right? There aren't any notes sticking out. One other way to practice this would be to play dynamics in your scales. So for example, we'll start low and soft and then crescendo. Don't speed up, but getting louder, more accented. And then as you go down, have that dynamic range back down to pianissimo, and that'll give your playing a little more of an organic or even conversational sound. And when you go to play lines, you can incorporate that into your lines, and that touch will make its way into your lines, so you can have a little more like sort of sing-songy or conversational approach. So my favorite pianist that does that is Jackie Bayard. It sounded like whenever he's playing lines, it sounds like he's speaking. You know, it sounds like the human voice. So I would say listen back to your favorite pianists and listen to their touch. You know, how does Oscar Peterson get that real sensitive touch? Or how does Red Garland have that really light, beautiful, crisp tone? You know, and see if you can replicate that on your instrument, whether it's an electric piano, an acoustic piano, or even a MIDI instrument, you know. So that would be my advice.
Cool.
Nice. Thanks. A lot of good stuff in there.
Yeah. No problem, Rich. That was a great answer, Sterling. Julian, I see you. One really quick tidbit. Bijan Tagvi, who obviously is with Jazz Piano School as well, he was telling me he studied with Fred Hirsch a little bit, and they were working on touch, and Fred had him doing, thinking about the off motion of his action in his hand, right? So rather than thinking about how he was coming down into the note, he was having him think about his release of the note, which Bijan said drastically changed his playing, like a slow release or slow fast, or, you know, just so these mental concepts can really kind of, like Sterling was saying too, dynamics, working in different expressions, maybe going soft, loud real quick, you know, all these different things can really help touch in a various ways. Cool.
Yeah, thinking about your release is interesting. Not something I had ever heard before.
Yeah,
Cool.
totally. That one stuck with me for sure.
I'm telling you, if you listen carefully to that podcast that Sterling did, the way he plays scales is incredible. Really, really amazing. For just playing scales, right? Really amazing.
Totally. Completely agree. Cool. Yes, Julian, let's go to you. How's it going?
No, not too bad. Apologies here. I'm not sure if I've got a question or I'm seeking clarification. So Sterling said, my understanding is when you reharm a tune, you're changing the underlying chords of the harmony of the melody. So if you're going to take the scenic route, doesn't that have implications for the melody as well? Because you may end up using chords which dictate the melodic change. Am I wrong, or am I going down the wrong route?
Sterling, I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Julian, because, you know, the moment we change the harmony, it's like, well, are we still playing by the rules?
Exactly.
Yeah. And, you know, that's a very fundamental question. It's a very personal question, actually, one that I've been exploring a lot recently. I'm graduating with my master's degree this spring, and I realized I'm coming up on my 6th year of studying music in the conservatory system. And the conservatory system is really there to implement the rules, right? They're there to teach us the rules. But the thing about music is that you don't always have to play by the rules. You know, if you play an A7 chord and it goes to B flat instead of D, you know, is somebody going to come along and like punish you, you know, say, no, you can't do that, you know, or you're playing a solo and you resolve like the F harmonic minor scale to D flat instead of B flat minor, right? And they say like the jazz police are going to come along and tell you, no, you can't do that, you know. So that's a very personal question, because it gets to the core of, well, what kind of music do you want to make? Do you want to make music that is striving for perfection, right? Do we want to play music that follows all the rules to the T? Are you the kind of person that likes to, you know, achieve success through well-trodden paths, or do you like to go off the beaten path and do some maybe more spontaneous or more surprising things that maybe don't apply to the normal rules? Some of my favorite musicians, one comes to mind, Dana Stevens, who's a wonderful tenor player here in New York City. He's got albums with Brad Meldau, and you know, plays with a bunch of great musicians. And one of my favorite things about him is that he just does stuff that I've heard nobody do before. You know, he does things I'm like, I don't even know how that worked, but he made it work. You know, so his sense of harmony is really interesting, because he does just a lot of unexpected things. He just kind of follows his ear. So getting back to your question, I would say, you know, I would take kind of a measured approach to reharmonization by first using the rules that you know work well, right? Kind of like Brendan and Trent were talking about, using maybe some like approach chords, like the 2-5-1. You know, we're still playing by the rules. We're still following the rules of Western tonal harmony. like an approach diminished chord. You know, all these are very conventional, and if you talk to a music theorist, they would say, good job, you know, you're doing it correctly. But especially when we get to, you know, more improvised music and exploring more, I like to kind of just throw the rules out the window, you know, and just say, what am I hearing? You know, what do I want to do? Not necessarily ascribing to a set of rules or what I know to be correct. You know, if you have a 5 chord and it resolves to a chord other than the 1 chord, that's a personal choice. You know, you're just making some different choices. So instead of going from E7, the correct answer, right, would be A, because E goes down to A. But maybe instead we take a left turn, and instead of going to A, we go up to F. That's a surprise, right? That's unexpected. And I think that's still technically, it's like a loophole, right? You go instead from 5 to 1, you go from 5 to like a flat 6 in the key of 5. So it's technically still a tonal resolution, but it's sort of an unexpected or wrong answer. But I think it sounds cool.
So effectively, you're saying, if you take the scenic route and you get lost, if it sounds right, if it sounds right, it is right.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself. If it sounds right, it is right. The great Duke Ellington said that. If it sounds good, it is good. So you know, we're not using. You can use music theory to come up with these answers, but at the end of the day, I think music is all about hearing and feeling. So if you hear something and it sounds good, or if it feels good, follow it.
Yeah, I remember Miles saying there isn't a bad note in music. It's the context of that note.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's how we get that freedom. So that's your journey, finding that freedom. So I wish you luck with that.
Thank you, sir. Cheers.
Awesome. We have some more time for any questions. I don't see any hands up right now, but does anyone have other questions? Again, they can be thoughts, epiphanies. It doesn't actually have to be a question. You know, anything that is on your mind, you've been struggling with, working at, everything helps.
I got a quick thought about what Sterling just said, if that's all right. Wait, can you hear me?
Yes, it's if you can turn your trend, it's still a little scratchy, but that's okay. If you can turn your mic up again, that'd be good.
All right, we're accepting the robot.
Yeah,
I'm a robot. All right, so once you find something that sounds good by breaking the rules, it's also kind of nice to figure out how it might fit into the rules if you stretch your understanding of the rules a little bit. So like what Sterling just did when he went to the F major after the E7, well, the next chord is a D minor, which is the relative minor of that F major that he just played. So essentially what he's doing is he's skipping the resolution to the A and just going straight to the D minor. So kind of like coming up with something just based on feel and then trying to pull it into some sort of understanding is one way you can remember if you want to try to do that again sometime in the future, rather than just having it be kind of a one-time thing.
Yeah. That's a very good orientation there.
Yep, totally. Awesome. Cool. And there's a great video that Kenny Werner did on YouTube. I think it's like a masterclass where he takes a melody and he literally picks random chords, and places it. Sterling or Trent, have you guys seen this video? He just is asking people to call out random chords, or he's calling out random chords, I think, and he's calling out the most, it's completely random. And he goes to play it, and it's fantastic. And his point is, it's like if you do it with intention and confidence and care, anything you play is going to sound amazing. So it was a great video. I loved it. Beverly, let's go to you.
Hi.
Hi.
My question was with all you young gentlemen was, how, because once you get to like, you've got some musicianship, how do you stay so that you don't keep, what are some of the things you've used to not get pulled into different rabbit holes with your career to stay focused?
With your career or like your learning path?
Your learning path, I guess that would probably be the better word. Like how to make that happen a little bit better than like all of a sudden I'm doing something else. I'm using my music, but I'm doing something else, and it takes me away from really going more focused with what I wanted to do with this part of it.
Okay, and you're talking about just specifically like jazz piano, or are you talking about like other ambitions in life?
No, I'm talking about jazz piano.
Okay. Because I get pulled out of stuff all the time with like other ambitions, like.
Well, yeah, there's that too. But we gotta enjoy. Life's here to enjoy. But
yeah. Yeah, I'll go first. I don't really have much to say, but like I think it's unavoidable, honestly. Jazz in itself and the pursuit of jazz and like your goals are, jazz is a rabbit hole. I found that to be true throughout most of my career, and actually it was the origin of why I created Jazz Piano School to give clarity and focus to students like yourself and everyone on here, because I got pulled in so many directions throughout my career, and I really want to kind of lay down a path. Now, I'm not saying my way is the best way, and I'm not saying rabbit holes aren't necessary to progress and growth, because they absolutely are. But at some point, my philosophies are, if you are stuck on a ship and you're completely lost, if you keep being lost and you don't have a map, your chances of hitting land are what? I don't know, 0.2%. Like you may stumble on some stuff. But if you really have a direction and a goal in mind to where you want to get to, focusing on elements and certain tools in jazz can lead you to your goal much faster than kind of just exploring rabbit holes of improv and voicings and transcriptions. And I truly believe there's a time for all of that. I think it just kind of, it matters when it falls into your career. So I don't think you necessarily, I think you have to kind of take a balance or like an assessment on what you've been doing, how you've been doing. Maybe it's time to go down a rabbit hole, Beverly. You know, maybe you might need that right now. That could be exactly what you need. And sometimes, a lot of times, those rabbit holes spark motivation and inspiration, and they spark all these elements within us that we don't necessarily know we need, but we did need them. And if it wasn't for that rabbit hole, we wouldn't be, still going forward. So I think they serve a lot of different purposes. And I think, regimented curriculum education, inside a jazz piano school and just in jazz in institutions like Sterling was saying, I think that's great as well. So I think there's a place for both of it. And I guess my final answer would be to assess where you are and don't necessarily think you need to avoid them. But kind of, again, assess where you are and see what might be best for you and where you are at that time being. Like if you've been lost, then it's probably time for a map or some structure. If you've been going down structure and you're practicing scales in all 12 keys at all tempos, and maybe it's time to go down a different rabbit hole, Sterling or Trent, you want to answer this?
Yeah, I'd love to add on to that. I think as aspiring pianists, we all have an added amount of pressure because what we do is so complicated for lack of a better word. There are times when I'm practicing the piano and maybe there's like a difficult chord progression or some, I hear Art Tatum play something and I'm like, oh no, and I'm kind of just like, man, maybe I should have played the saxophone. Like that would have been so much easier, just having to be responsible for one note instead of 88, 10 at a time or more. But that all is to say, jazz piano as a pursuit can be very overwhelming sometimes. Because like Brendan said, there's so much that we could do at one given time. We can be practicing scales, we can be practicing chord progressions, we can be learning transcriptions, we can be learning piano arrangements, we can be learning reharms. We can be doing X, Y, and Z, and then, there's still more to be done. So, it's almost like a never-ending pursuit, which can be overwhelming. But the flip side of that is there's always room for new inspiration. And for me personally, I find my inspiration by listening. You can be a classical pianist and find inspiration from learning new repertoire. I have many friends that are professional classical pianists, or they teach classical piano, and they're always learning some new piece, right? Maybe they're learning a new concerto, like, oh, have you played the Rachmaninoff Concerto number 3? Have you done the Bartok number 6? Oh, I'm learning the Bach complete well-tempered clavier. That is a almost never-ending pursuit, because with the classical tradition, you've got upwards of 300 years of piano repertoire, which is a tall order, right? But for jazz, we've got 100 years, but within that 100 years, it's a rich, rich lineage of amazing musicians and innovators and visionaries who took these 88 keys and said, I'm going to make my own mark. And to me, that is the most inspiring, because I can listen to someone, I can go down that rabbit hole of saying, this month I'm going to listen to nobody but, Brad Meldau. And, you get all kinds of stuff. You get his Beatles music, which he just put out that beautiful album. You got his Radiohead music, like some of the early trio stuff. You've got his recent Bach Revisited project. That's a totally, rich in wealth of inspiration for implementing classical harmony, So I like to find inspiration from the musicians themselves, the pianists that came before, like Jelly Roll Morton, Willie the Lion Smith, Art Tatum, Bill Evans, Keith Jarrett, you name it. Choose your favorite. And when I listen to them, I can go down that rabbit hole and get really into their playing, but also kind of face the mirror back towards myself and say, well, what is it about their playing that inspires me? And then when I go to sit down at the piano, I have a much clearer idea of what I need to do. Instead of, oh, I could do a million things right now, what should I do? It's easy to get overwhelmed. So instead, I'm going to say, let me learn, this tune that Bill Evans plays. I was actually, my roommate today was playing Israel, the minor blues, D minor. That one I need to revisit, because I haven't played it in a while, but, something about Bill Evans playing on that tune just really inspires me and makes me want to get to the piano. So getting back to your question, Beverly, if we tend to go down one rabbit hole and maybe get a little lost, I always try to come back to the keyboard and come back to my favorite pianists and say, what were they doing that can inspire me to go in a particular direction? So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's some good ideas, sir.
Trent, what about you?
Good ideas.
So with all of that as your inspiration, and with the ultimate goal of being able to sit down and play, I think one way to stay on track is to test yourself. No matter what rabbit hole you're down, no matter what you're working on, harmonically, whatever you're listening to, sit down and play for 45 minutes. And if you can do that, then great. Go down another rabbit hole. If you can't, and if you get stuck after 2 tunes and you can play your scales really well, but you have nothing else to play, then get yourself up to a certain baseline standard of, I feel good about sitting down and playing for, my time limit is 45 minutes. And even if you get really good at that, that'll change because you'll stop being satisfied. If you're playing the same stuff over and over again at your 45 minutes and you don't feel good about it, then that'll kind of direct you on what to go work on. So I think kind of zooming in everything ultimately on your playing and listening back to it and what it sounds like. The music will tell you what you need to work on. It'll be pretty obvious. There'll be things that cringe you out to listen to yourself play, and you'll say, okay, I'm going to go work on that. And at the same time, everything Sterling is talking about is going all on at the same time. I don't think you should ever sacrifice just deep listening and getting inspired for the sake of learning a bunch of tunes. But at the same time, it's a good way to just measure your progress and get some output out of all this awesome input that you're receiving. With that being said, I love rabbit holes. I go down a lot of rabbit holes.
Okay.
But I just think testing yourself along the way of just being able to play and being satisfied at some level with it is a good way to make sure you're still kind of on track.
All right, that makes sense. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Was that helpful?
Yes, because I can glean some good stuff from there. I play music. I play classical. I play in church. I play a lot of things. But I just seem to I want to work more and more on the jazz, and then my rabbit holes are being pulled to go do other things. And it's I got to figure out how to, if I just say, no, I'm going to make sure I get 45 minutes a day, garner that, put that so that I at least can make that an important priority, bump it up. That doesn't get the last part of my day.
Yeah. And to be clear, I wasn't saying you should practice for 45 minutes a day, although you probably should. I was saying you should feel comfortable sitting down and playing, performing for 45 minutes.
Oh,
yeah, just playing, improvising, taking some solos. I don't know how many tunes that would take, depending on how long you play, maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
It doesn't have to be a ton of tunes. Just feel comfortable playing. But also, that you probably should practice that much too.
Thank you.
Yeah, Marie, I'm going to go to you in a second. I think just assessing what you want, what do you want? What's your goal? Do you want to be able to do what Trent said and play well? And when you do go to sit down and perform, do you feel content about your performance? If not, then you should probably maybe discipline yourself to fix that. If it doesn't feel good inside of you, what you're doing, what do you need to do to fix those problems in your playing? Otherwise, it's kind of you're avoiding them through the rabbit holes. But if you're cool with where you are, and Trent said he loves rabbit holes, so do I, you may be spontaneously inspired to go down a rabbit hole, like Sterling was saying, and check out a whole bunch of other pianists, because you want to implement some of their textures in your playing at any given moment in time. So.
And in jazz music, this happens whenever you get modal on one chord for 20 minutes, and that happens sometimes in the middle of a tune. You're playing a form, and then if you just start soloing on one chord, that's the musical equivalent of going down a rabbit hole. There's a time and a place for it, but if that's all you do, eventually you're going to want to get back to playing some changes.
Okay, yes, I'm having a hard time getting through I can play chords, I can read chords, but really knowing my flat fives, it's holding me up and it's driving me crazy. So I just gotta get all of that in my fingers.
There you go.
Play some flat fives in church.
All right, so I gotta find some, find where I can play them in. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Beverly. Marie, I'm going to go to you real quick. Anecdote real quick. My friend was playing a concert and he didn't know the tune. I'm not going to name names, trumpet player. And they came off the stage and one of his counter musicians who was playing the concert with them was like, man, that was the most killing stuff that I've ever heard you play. And he goes, oh, really? Cause I was making stuff up. I had no idea what the tune was or what the changes were. So it just goes to show in jazz, it's you can explore and experiment and make up stuff and you're still going to sound killing to other people, even if you don't know what you're doing. Marie, let's go to you.
Hello.
Hi.
So, hi. What I would like more practice or help with is rhythms. Just simply being able to read and play more complex rhythms, accompany with my left hand with more easily with rhythms. My kids were in my grandkids went to a school in Philadelphia, and their music teacher, he was amazing. He had them reading and just clapping and being able to read very complex music and rhythms. And I just don't see a lot of places where I can practice that.
Gotcha. Okay. Are you looking for like, let's try, like Trent said a really great thing earlier today. Let's try and isolate the goal, right? And the sticking point. So are you looking for left hand comping rhythms, like for jazz standards? Are you playing solo piano?
So yes, left hand comping rhythms, yes. But then also, you know, with the melodies too, to be able to more quickly, yeah, or just counting. I've had years of classical, and I can kind of get the feel, and it's pretty straight, and I can like play that, and I don't think a lot about counting. But when it gets more complex, I sort of, you know, I guess I'm not disciplining in counting and practicing that way.
Sure. Yeah. You know, I think there's two areas that you can kind of go into here. I think just learning and practicing rhythm is kind of just a traditional route you can take. Honestly, just repping rhythmic phrases. You know, if you're a drummer, you would be doing a lot of this, right? And even as a pianist, you should be doing a lot of this as well too, because it's very helpful. But obviously, drummers are required to do a lot of rhythm things. But if you are not familiar with 16th notes or 16th notes on different parts of the beat, you're not going to find that much in jazz standards, because it's mostly eighth notes and quarter notes, you know. But whatever the rhythmic issue is you're having, I think that would be just tackling those rhythms. But you did mention reading and having it come out more instinctually, like internally. Again, I think just repping certain rhythms and repping your sight reading ability would help a lot.
I'm actually pretty good at sight reading. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
But I feel like the jazz and even the way I want to play, I want it to be more, you know, syncopated or just more creative rhythmically.
So is this in your improv you're talking about then?
Yes,
Okay. Gotcha. Right. So that's a great learning lesson for everyone as well, is like the more specific you can get about your, you know, what you're trying to solve in your playing, the better it's going to be for you, because improv is a whole different ballgame than reading, right? So if you're trying to incorporate rhythmic stuff into your improv, there's a lot of stuff, I think, like, again, podcasts and things like that, but isolating specific textures. So if I were just to use like quarter notes, you know, in my improv, or just quarter notes and eighth notes. This is what I did a lot with one of my teachers. He would really just focus my playing on just quarter notes and eighth notes. So I might go, I switched my sound. What'd you say, Trent?
I said that sounded like an 80s pop ballad.
Yeah, it was. It was my piano 3, my pan piano. But just really focusing on quarter notes and eighth notes, or maybe just quarter notes, like. But isolating a certain rhythm that you're not having much success with and really working on that would be an exercise that I would give you to try to tackle more rhythmic stuff. Again, if you're looking for syncopation, I would probably practice more upbeats, eighth notes on the upbeat specifically, right? Or, you know, maybe all upbeats, like, I wouldn't do it like this, but obviously you can put a click on or something like that. So my general advice to you would just be to really kind of isolate the rhythmic feature that you're trying to go for, whether it's triplets, a combination of triplets and eighth notes, a combination of triplet and quarter notes, and work at that. Claire had a really good thing too. Try playing from Charlie Parker Omnibook, go slow, get the rhythm right, then speed it up. So obviously taking rhythmic examples from transcriptions and things like that. Sterling or Trent, go ahead,
I have
Trent.
a thought.
Go ahead.
if you've got a piano, close the lid. If it's a keyboard, you'll have to figure out a different way. But tap a solo like you're a drummer with
Right.
both hands if you want. Record it, and then arrange it with notes afterwards on the piano, and figure out how to play the rhythms that you naturally play because it's hard to do it at the same time. It's really hard to do it at the same time. But if you just purely focus on rhythm, don't even worry about the notes,
Right.
and then put the notes in, you'll start to figure out some patterns that then you can start to work in your
Okay.
soloing. But just go full on rhythm and
Yeah.
then arrange it. And that's
Okay.
the way to get started, is to playing kind of authentic, natural rhythms.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Cool. Awesome stuff here, guys. And again, this will be, you guys can revisit any of the education here, obviously, and listen back to it and things like that. So, yeah, Joni, let's go to Joni's iPad.
Hi.
Hi.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I've been listening to you for some time and learning a lot, but I had a question, wondering if you guys could comment on your best advice. I would call myself an intermediate player. If I'm jamming or somebody wants to play something at a high speed, it seems like I'm able to comp okay. But when it comes to soloing, I suddenly feel like if I try it, I sound very elementary. I just kind of freeze up. It's like I have this fear of very fast music, where all you could think is maybe 2 beats in a measure when it's really 4. So what would you have to say about how can I improve some of my, I know a lot of scales, I know some theory. I can pretty much put nice lines together for soloing when the speed is at a relaxed kind of a swing, somewhere in the middle. But when I'm going fast, forget about it. It's like I forget everything I know and I just kind of freeze. Is there something you can say that might help me just break out of this place that I'm stuck in to venture out into that, I don't know, what's fast, 250,
For sure.
300, somewhere up there. How do I handle myself without crawling out with my tail between my legs?
No problem. I'm gonna turn it over to Sterling and Trent in just a second. But Joni, I just want to first say that's a great question. I'm sure a lot of people here have the exact same question as you. So thank you very much for asking that question.
Sure.
And I'll say I have experienced this a lot, right? And fast tempos are very difficult. Okay. Learning how to improv over fast tempos are very difficult. And to this day, still fast tempos, like when I'm playing them, I got to do a couple of things, but we've all been there. So thanks for sharing that. Sterling, go ahead.
Yeah, I love that question, Joni. Playing fast is something that, we're all working on. I'm definitely still working on it. But it's one of those things that's like, we got to be able to do it, especially, when you're going to the session and somebody just calls a tune on you and you have to be ready, and another great reason to work on playing fast, even if you're not going out to jam sessions, is what one of my teachers calls your max capability. Right? So if right now your max capability is like, well, I can comfortably play around 120 or 140 beats per minute, and once I get up past like 180, the wheels start coming off a little bit, so to speak.
Right.
If you practice playing at faster tempos, 200 and up, I think 240 is a good goal for a fast swing tempo. If you practice playing those tempos faster and faster, maybe you're not, at your, best, most perfect solos, especially at those upper tempos. But what you're doing is increasing your max capacity, right? You're pushing beyond your limits. And all of a sudden, whereas 160 or 180 might have been really pushing it before, you've practiced playing at 240. So 160 or 180 beats per minute, it's like, oh, okay, this is like, before it was pretty stressful, and now it's like I'm kind of just going for a jog in the park, right? It's a little more accessible. And then 120 feels like a walk in the park. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So one way I would recommend practicing this is going slow. And that might be counterintuitive, right? Some people might think, oh, well, I need to play fast. I should practice playing really fast. Just a...
Oh, wow.
Just like total chaos, right? Well, that's not going to get you very far. It's I always say you practice how you play, right? So if you practice chaotically, then you're going to play chaotically, and we want to get to those faster tempos being more comfortable, more accessible. So I would recommend, choose a form that you like, whether it's a 12-bar blues. I would recommend something like a rhythm changes. Something with a 32-bar form can be a great vehicle for faster improvisation. And the first thing you want to do is play slow, right? So just like if you're practicing scales, like if your goal is to get your scales up to, 240 beats per minute to the quarter note, you got to first practice them here. And then once you get, really solid in that, then you get that tempo up. But we have to play slow to be able to play fast, to have those pathways in a clear and approachable way. So if you're playing over a form like rhythm changes, if your goal is to play, here is the half note, I would say first start slow, like... and so on. And you want to choose some voicings that are going to work at that faster tempo. And you can go up, maybe 20 clicks at a time, 120, 140, 160, 180. Once you get into the upper 200s, then you're pushing your max capacity, right?
Okay.
So my max capacity, if I put a metronome on, maybe somewhere around 240, like here. You know what I mean? So I gotta be able to do it slow before I can do it fast. So I'd say
Don't you
take that
think
approach.
of, I'm sorry, Sterling.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think shorter phrases or it's always my goal always to be what I could do slowly to play that same content in a fast speed, or do I begin to think different in shorter phrases or less, where I don't need it? I don't know if I'll ever get that kind of dexterity.
Well, that's okay. I mean, the important thing to remember is that once you start pushing that max capacity and getting into those upper tempos, you're going to naturally play melodies that probably wouldn't work, at a slower tempo, and vice versa. The stuff that you're used to playing at maybe 140, 160, more comfortable medium swing tempo, that stuff is not going to work at the faster tempos. So what you're doing is really exploring a different aspect of your musical voice. You're searching and reaching for melodies that you might not normally play, but again, practice them at the slowest tempo to see what will work, kind of make a plan for what will work at the faster tempos. I think you have a great idea with the shorter phrases. Some of my favorite musicians You know, like I mean, when Bill Evans plays faster tempos, he's definitely using shorter phrases. Red Harlan, same thing, very sparse. Count Basie is the best example of this to me. When he plays, you know, like listen to the tune Whirly Bird, that has a nice piano solo on it, and he's just playing real short phrases because and he didn't have a ton of dexterity. You know, he was really a stride pianist. He started out as a stride pianist, and he didn't have that dexterity like Bud Powell with the eighth notes. So he played a lot of shorter phrases. You can hear his recordings even at faster tempos. So,
all right. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Great answer, Sterling. Yeah, Joni, this is a rabbit hole in itself. I think Sterling touched upon a lot of different things there. The last thing I'll add, and if anyone has other questions too, we'll probably be wrapping up soon. So go ahead and raise your hand now if you want to get those answered before we close up shop here. But there's different approaches. I think you're on the right track for sure. Like Sterling demonstrated rhythm changes. And if you look at the chord changes, it can be overwhelming seeing all of the chord changes, right? So that can kind of short circuit your brain a little bit, but you can approach it in a different way. You can just say, okay, I'm just going to play all B flat over this, for example. That would be a way to kind of ease your body, ease your hands, ease your mind into improv. And a lot of times that can help actually with the speed too. And like we were talking to Beverly, or I think Julian asked this on one of the boot camps or something, like how there's a bunch of 2/5s, you know, if you change your perception of the harmony a little bit, like again, and a great example is rhythm changes, and think all B flat, that's going to be probably a lot easier for you than trying to think more vertically and hit an improv over every single change that you see in the tune. But you also may have issues, technically speaking, or jazz language issues happening as well, where you simply don't know what to play over certain changes. That could be an issue. Like Sterling said, technically you should go very slow at first. And if you can't really do that too, that has to be kind of addressed as well. So like I said, it's a pretty heavy question. If you're studying with someone personally, or if you're a member of Jazz Piano School, definitely shoot us a ticket. We can help you out more. But it's something to be kind of worked on and tackled consistently to help that get stronger for sure.
Right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It.
No problem. James, what's up, man? Thanks for being here, buddy.
Yeah, I just saw this at the last minute and kind of tuned in. Didn't want to miss it.
Yeah, for sure. How can we help you?
Yeah, I guess kind of touching on the same point, just kind of like following like certain like just maybe substituting like one chord for all the overwhelming changes on, say, like a lead sheet from the real book or something. Does the same kind of apply to more abstract changes in, say, a big band piece? Have like the charts kind of, some of them will have a really specific spelling of a chord, not just the change written over top. I don't know, like, is there a way to simplify, or is it just a matter of repetition and practice? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I'll let Trent and Sterling handle this in a sec too, because I'm sure Sterling got a lot of original music, big band practice at Manhattan School of Music. But in my experience playing with big bands, I think it's a combination of a number of different things. I think as a chart-wise, like a chart approach focus, meaning like you have to kind of ask yourself a couple of questions, like who is someone writing, is someone who is writing this, is it like an original piece of music? Do they want you to play a specific voicing or like a sound? Some charts that I've seen in big bands, people will say like, over a minor 7, like I want Phrygian, like this is the mode I want, this is the sound I want, so I'll experience that. If it's a written voicing, like piano voicing in the chart, I would ask them, am I bound to these extensions or these colors? If they say no, then cool. If it's a traditional chart, I'd probably go to the recording. and listen to what the pianist or the big band is playing over that particular spot in the recording to kind of gain information. But I would try to kind of get some more information to ascertain whether I can expand upon that or not. I think that was part of your question. And then kind of stringing abstract big band chords or original music chords together, that's an art as well. And I think that comes with kind of just working on the changes individually for sure. I think that still applies here. Like if you have, some sort of a sus2-4 going to a D flat minor major, whatever, like you see so much stuff in original music. What I tend to do is I focus on each chord. I get the sound. So if I'm trying to go for a certain chord, I'll spend time on that chord. I'll spend time moving up and down, and I'll try to work it. I'll try to work it into the next chord. So again, like I said, I just try to drill those two things. And I would go from like a sus sound. Like I'll just spend open time doing this, just hearing the sounds. And again, if it's going to, what did I say, D flat minor major, right? Learning how to connect these two sounds so that I feel comfortable about that. And then moving it into that's my best approach or technique, because my ears aren't used to these harmonies again. And like in original music, when I'm shedding it, I'll have to get used to these transformation of the harmonies and how they kind of move about into the next chord. So I would say yes, like I still isolate the chords and move them in, but let me hear what Sterling and Trent have to say as well.
Let me go real quick because I actually have to hop off.
Okay, Trent. Yeah, go.
I just want to say one little bit that first of all, if you want to learn how to reharmonize, we were talking about that earlier. Look at a big band chart. Most of it is 2-5-1s based, but there's a million different chords in there that when you're looking at it as a big band chart, you think, oh, there's a bunch of chords, but really it's a reharmonization at some level. So that's one thing, and two is those extensions, as Brendan often mentions, specific voicing that someone might want, but also it could be a symbol as to what the function of the chord is. Like when you see certain extensions, it's telling you, it's kind of like a door, like a sign telling you what the sound they really want is. And even if it's not big band stuff, just if you're looking at any lead sheet in the real book or anything, a lot of times those extensions, I always try to tell people, are just kind of showing you what the sound is supposed to be rather than the specific voicing you're supposed to play. Although in big band, oftentimes it is the specific voicing you're supposed to play, but it can kind of open you up to what the underlying sound is supposed to be that section. And with that said, I have to leave, but it's been great, you guys. I love you all, and
Thanks,
I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for being here. Awesome. Sterling, you want to take a crack at this?
No, I like where you were going with that, Brendan. I think that covers it.
Okay. Any experiences from MSN that you've found that kind of relate to that at all, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've played a variety of big band music, ranging from the more traditional, like you said, where, like, think about somebody like, like Bill Holman, very, very straight ahead, or Stan Kenton, like their big band charts are just all slashes, there's like no information. And the band might, like Trent said, the band might be playing all these cool reharmed chords, and we just have like F7. So like you said, you can sit with the recording and see what information you can glean from that. You might have more specific, ranging on the more specific harmonies, like Thad Jones, for example. I've played Thad Jones charts, those are like charts that you see the Village Vanguard Orchestra playing on Monday nights. A lot of Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, great big band repertoire. Thad was the one who said the band can be playing all these harmonies and tritone substitutions, and the bass is just walking, F7. And as a pianist, I see that, or I hear that, and I want to copy some of that. And then you get the more modern contemporary jazz big band music, like Maria Schneider, especially. Her pianists, like the late great Frank Kimbrough or Gary Versace, they'll play. A lot of times she has specific voicings, Or she'll say, you know, this section is just F-ish. You know, you can play any kind of F. Like the chart will literally say like F, the chord, and then the quality is ish. So that gives you all kinds of freedom. You know, if you're just in F, you know, you can play some modal voicings, and then it starts to, you know, it's still F, but it's F-ish, right? Still in F, but we're kind of going off into a whole different area, you know. So I would just say, you know, draw from the compositional voice of whoever's band, you know, you're finding yourself in at that point in time, you know. Maria just has some beautiful open harmony, you know, a lot of triad based stuff. So I always try to learn, even if I don't have the melody in the chart, I always try to learn the melody, especially if it's not totally obvious. Like I played in an ensemble with the great Miguel Zenon, and he writes these charts, and he'll have all these chord symbols with various chromatic chords, but there's no melody written. So I have to kind of interpret or intuit the melody. And it can be really, you know, complex harmonies, but to me the melody is always really helpful, so that can give you some direction to getting inside those harmonies, so to speak. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, great question, James. That's awesome. Thanks for being here too. Cool. Well, guys, thank you guys so much. I'm going to take Cow's question. Hopefully I said your name right. Probably not, but and then this will be the last question. And again, if you guys have more questions, feel free to email us at any time. If you want to hear from Sterling, Trent, or I specifically, just always go to jazzpianoschool.com/support, and I can siphon off the questions to in particular teachers if you want me, or if you just have a general question. I'm always here to help. We're always here to help you, even if you're not a member. So it's all good. We always love helping. Okay. Cow, is that how you pronounce your name?
Hi. Yeah.
All right.
I'm not a native English speaker, so that maybe you can understand well, but I try to do my questions. I'm now learning jazz piano at stage 3, but since last month, I started watching the Sterling a weekly live lesson, and then it's amazing. I learn a lot, but every week there are so many elements that we learn from Sterling's video, and then I don't have much time to do the lessons at stage 3, and I don't know how I can combine watching a weekly lesson and also doing my stage 3 courses. So if you give me some tips to how can I combine those useful lessons, both live lessons and also web courses. It's just my question. Maybe it's a stupid question, but I would like to know your opinion or your tips. Thank you.
Sure. Great question. Fantastic. Yes. So, you know, Sterling and I talk about this a lot and like try to go back and forth about content and what's most helpful for all of you. And I know there's non-Jazz Piano School members on here as well, but yeah, the tune of the month is a great way if you're looking for more kind of repertoire based learning where you have a certain foundation under your belt. And I would say, even if you don't, it's still a great place to learn live from a teacher, you know, Sterling and myself when I do it, to get educational feedback. I would say a balance, and I think it depends where you are, Cal, in your learning journey. I would say a lot of the foundational elements, you know, stage 0, 1, and 2 of the Jazz Piano School main course curriculum are very important to jazz harmony, just learning jazz in general. So I would really recommend that if you're a beginner, I think you said you're intermediate, I'm not sure, but if you're a beginner, spending like 80% of your time inside the curriculum is your best bet. And then maybe every other month kind of learning tunes through the tune of the month. But tunes are focused on inside the main course curriculum as well. I would say to kind of test your skills like at the tune of the month. What Sterling is teaching you is obviously inside tips on that stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean like you have to practice that stuff. Maybe you can work on the tune because he does a lot of walkthrough. It's a lot of great information that you should know about the tune. You can apply the certain things you're learning in the main course curriculum to the tune of the month that's being taught. You can work on one portion of the tune of the month. Maybe you just want to work on improv, for the tune of the month, or maybe you just want to work on your voicings, or maybe you just want to work on your solo piano. So like, let's say you're learning more solo piano based stuff inside the main course curriculum, or let's say you're learning more voicing based stuff inside the main course curriculum. You can apply that to the tune of the month and obviously kind of work through your voicings on that tune and show up, ask Sterling questions. Obviously, if he's doing the improv lesson, over the tune of the month, maybe you can pass on that. But the walkthrough, the analysis is great. The solo piano is great. I mean, they're all great, but just pick and choose kind of what's working best for you. And again, inside the main course curriculum, it's like a honking kahuna of information, right? And it's all important. It's all pertinent. But obviously, like I was telling Beverly, we want to assess ourselves. How do we feel? Like, how's it been going? Have I been super regimented? Like, was I in a cave? Was I in the shed just like working at these scales and chords for like a month, 2 months? Do I need to like see some daylight? Maybe it's time for you to go to the tune of the month for a little bit, like to get a refresher, or like change your mindset a little bit. But that's kind of how I would kind of balance it, kind of feel yourself out, what you need and what you are trying to get, like what your goal is too. And you can kind of, assess what you might need from the tune of the month compared to the main course curriculum success path.
Okay, thank you.
All right, no problem. Cool. All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to do it for today. Thank you guys so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to teach you all. Obviously, Trent, Sterling, and I are all part of Jazz Piano School, and teaching you guys is what motivates us and inspires us, and it's always a pleasure. Without all of you supporting Jazz Piano School since the time I started, it would not be here, So everyone's saying thank you to me. It's really should be thank you to you guys, because you guys are honestly what makes this happen. So I truly appreciate it. You guys can go back to listen to the podcast, the video recording, if you want. If you want to watch any of what we were playing, excuse me, slow down some of the stuff that you were seeing Sterling do, or Trent, or myself, learn from that. But besides that, I think we have 301 lined up. Sterling, would be great for you to do the touch podcast. That'd be really cool. That stuck with me in my brain after we were talking about that earlier. I think that'd be a really cool podcast coming up. So thanks, Lucas. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here. It was great to have you guys. And feel free to reach out again, obviously, whenever you want about anything. And we'll always be here for you. We're always here to support you and help you out. All right? Take care, guys. See you later. Thanks, Sterling. Thanks, everyone. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Don't forget to go to jazzpianoschool.com to check out all of our free, amazing education, all of the free podcast blogs. We do have a membership if you're looking to take a next step forward with us, get access to over 1,000 different jazz piano videos, playbooks, mini courses, a main course curriculum success path, and so much more. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at support@jazzpianoschool.com. I hope you have a wonderful day, and as always, happy practicing.